Whisper Creek, a quiet town where secrets flow as deep as the water itself. For generations, the residents of Calder's Hollow thought they knew their home, but the creek remembers everything. Bodies hidden for decades. Disappearances no one could explain. And a darkness that has lurked in plain sight, waiting to be revealed. Tonight, we dive into the chilling story of Whisper Creek, where the water doesn't forget, and neither does the town. The first thing anyone notices about Whisper Creek is how quiet it is. Even on the hottest summer afternoons, when the cicadas buzz like static in the air, the creek seems to absorb the sound. Locals say the water has a way of swallowing voices. Some say it listens. Some say it remembers. For generations, people in the town of Calder's Hollow have driven past the narrow bridge without a second thought. Children skidded their bikes along the banks. Couples picnicked in the shade of the willows. But those who live near it long enough start noticing the undertone, the way the creek moves around something unseen, just beneath the surface. It was early July during an especially harsh drought when the truth began to emerge. Rain hadn't fallen in weeks, and the creek had shrunk to a pale trickle, exposing banks that had been underwater for decades. Driftwood and mud formed awkward shapes along the creek bed. And then someone noticed the shapes. Not rocks. Not logs. Something else entirely. Marie Connolly was the first to see it. She'd grown up in Calder's Hollow and wandered the creek often, but this morning, as she walked her dog along the exposed bank, she tripped over something that didn't belong. At first, she thought it was debris, maybe a discarded mannequin. But the outline was unmistakable. Human. Her scream echoed down the empty banks. Sheriff Tom Greaves arrived an hour later, and confirmation was swift and grim, at least 3 bodies, partially buried and decayed from years underwater. The bindings on the bodies left no room for doubt, these were not accidents. Whisper Creek had been hiding something, and now, it was giving it up. News spread through Calder's Hollow like wildfire. The town, where everyone knew everyone, suddenly felt unfamiliar. Conversations turned quiet, cautious. People began recalling disappearances from years past, teenagers, young women, even one of the town's deputies who had vanished decades ago. None of these cases had been solved. Now, all at once, the creek was revealing answers no one wanted. Investigators worked methodically. The first bodies were examined in a temporary morgue at the community center. Every detail was documented, every clue preserved. The binding suggested restraint, and forensic analysis indicated deliberate placement. Some victims had been underwater for decades, others were more recent, perhaps within the last 5 years. Calder's Hollow had a killer among them, and the creek had been the perfect accomplice. During the investigation, an elderly local came forward. He claimed he had been a boy when it began and had seen a man dragging bodies to the creek, taking advantage of the water to hide evidence. He refused to name the man, insisting he had taken an oath to never speak. Yet the details matched unsolved disappearances from decades prior. Further digging revealed a chilling pattern. Victims were deposited during periods of heavy rain, when the creek was swollen and the evidence would disappear beneath the water. The murderer understood the creek intimately, using its currents, its silence, its concealment to their advantage. Calder's Hollow had been under the shadow of someone methodical, patient, and terrifyingly confident that no one would notice. Old photographs and school records added pieces to the puzzle. Figures were seen near the creek at odd hours. Some missing children had last been spotted in the area. Interviews with residents unearthed whispered stories of strange noises, pets disappearing, and figures moving along the banks at dusk. Adults had dismissed these stories as imagination, children had feared them as folklore. But now, in the light of confirmed discovery, they gained a dark weight. The town held a meeting to confront fear and uncertainty. Parents refused to let their children near the water. Some demanded the creek be drained or blocked entirely. Sheriff Greaves addressed the crowd with measured words, promising ongoing investigation, but the unease lingered. The creek was a part of the land, part of the town's history, and now it had become a marker of human darkness. As weeks passed, forensic teams uncovered fragments of clothing, jewelry, and personal belongings layered in the creek bed. Carbon dating confirmed some were decades old, some startlingly recent. Calder's Hollow learned that the creek had been used repeatedly, over generations, as a dumping ground for the wicked acts of someone who had moved among them unnoticed. When the drought ended, water returned, hiding much of what had been revealed. Yet the psychological and emotional scars remained. The town installed cameras and increased patrols, but for those who had grown up near Whisper Creek, nothing would ever feel normal again. Years later, when asked about the creek, Sheriff Greaves, now retired, would simply shake his head. He did not speak of suspects or victims. He only said, quietly, "Water doesn't forget. And neither does Whisper Creek." For the people of Calder's Hollow, that was enough. Every time they crossed the narrow bridge, a part of them watched, alert, waiting. Because sometimes, the dead do not speak. The creek does it for them. And Whisper Creek never forgets.